Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Edward and Edge podcast, where we talk about ideas that give you advantage in your life, career, or business. And today we have an interesting person who will be sharing with us their journey in career leadership across the global stage, because this person has worked in multiple countries in some of the global brands and will be sharing with us what it means to lead diverse team and also adapt to different cultures and all of that. I'm not the guest. The guest is here himself. We have Mr. Dominic, who will be sharing this with us. Mr. Dominic, welcome to the Edward and Edge podcast. Can you just tell us your full name and how you're doing today?
Yeah, hi Edward. Nice to meet you, and I'm really excited and grateful to be here. I'm Dominik Miturski, and I'm doing great today. Yeah, again, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. It's an important and exciting topic, and I'm really excited to share my story. I hope it will give answers to questions that people have. I hope it will provide some assurance and comfort to those who maybe struggle. So yeah, let's do this.
Awesome. Thank you very much for choosing to feature on our podcast today, because we have global listeners who will be learning from your story and all the places that you have been, all the experiences that you've gathered. So just to get us going, I'd like to first of all, I just ask, the seasons that we're in here in Scotland, what are you thankful for and what are you excited about today?
Okay, I'm thankful for a lot of things.
Okay, yeah.
Speaking of Scotland itself, well, I'm thankful for the fresh air and clean water and pristine nature we have here. I think that's one of the characteristics of Scotland. I'm thankful that it's also quite a mature country where the system works. It works quite well, although you will hear local people complaining a lot about it, but I don't think there is anything wrong about it. So that's all great stuff here. And what I'm excited about, I guess today, is really telling you a few things from what happened to me in my life, what led me to where I am, and yeah, because that's all really important to me. So I love talking about it.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And we're excited to have you here and to share your story with us as we talk about as we talk about navigating global leadership. We're learning insight from cross-cultural career trajectory. But just before we go into that, so that the audience gets a glimpse about who you are, the person behind the voice and the face, all the things that you have done. Yes, you've traveled from Poland to Germany to China to Scotland and some other places that you would share with us. I know recently we had a conversation over coffee and you told me you just went to Egypt and back. You're a bit of a traveler. But just before we get into all of that, I'd like to ask you this question. And I like asking this question to all my guests, all right? If there is an animal that describes your personality, what animal will that be? Just before you jump into that, just to give context, it's beyond the animal. It's what the values that the animal represents that we're talking about, and we'd like to know that about you. So mine is a lion. Is a blend. Is a lion, an eagle, and a wolf. I will not get into the details, but what is yours?
Interesting, three animals you chose there. Okay, because I actually was thinking about the two of them.
Nice.
I was thinking about an eagle and a wolf. But yeah, I think some sort of bird, for sure. I think, well, I guess when you think about birds and you think about the king of the skies, I think obviously an eagle springs to mind. So I might just as well stick with that one. You know, I think the thing I think of when I think of birds is calmness and distance, and perspective. Obviously, being high up in the air, soaring through the skies, they get that unique distance perspective on what's happening down below, and they can appreciate the greater picture. And I always like to do that. I always like taking a step back from a situation, from an environment, from a problem, and just appreciating what's around it, because I think it's all important. So that's how I think, that's how I work, and I think that's what I could share with an eagle. But I think an eagle also, I think, symbolizes, as I think birds symbolize to many people, as freedom. I think the ability to soar in the sky, flying everywhere and anywhere without any barriers that perhaps
Yeah.
are present at ground level, a wall, a chasm, and an ocean that
Yes.
you can't just cross, you're a bit limited with that. A bird, no, that's just surreal to them. It's like, no problem, I'll just fly over it. And I think that's something that I perhaps envy, that's something I desire, and that helps with traveling as well. It kind of
I was
translates
going to
into
say
really
that.
what I love doing is traveling, and there's no easier way to move around than by air. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Amazing, amazing. You see how some of these animals that we kind of find connection with, they embody the values that we have as individuals. And I can confirm that. I mean, having, share a meal, talk over coffee, you have shared with me your story and how you traveled from Poland across multiple countries, serving with global brands, and now in Scotland. Now, can you just tell us about how your journey started? That you moved from, I mean, from Poland and all the multiple countries you moved. Can you just tell us a backstory and the places you've been, how your career started, and where you are right now?
that's a loaded question. So, a couple things in there. How it started. Wow.
Yes.
Okay, I'll try and be concise here. So I think it all started with a mindset that I developed when I think I was a child. I was fascinated with nature and geography. I loved watching documentaries. I watched looking at books with nice pictures before I could read, and then reading about foreign and exotic countries. And I think that's where it started. And looking at the globe and that big round ball with blue and yellow and green colors, I always thought, okay, well, I need to see all of this one day. I think that kind of seed was planted by myself early on. So I think that's how it started, really. But obviously, I couldn't do it as a child, so I had to wait until I do my school, graduate from university, and that's when it started as well. So my first big move was during university. I went to study to Germany. So that
Wow.
was the first big move, and I then returned back to Poland and started my career over there. And at some point during that career, I had the opportunity within one of the global brands that I work with to be transferred to China. Right? And naturally, I seized that opportunity. It wasn't my own decision. Back at that moment in time, I was already married and I was already having a young child. So it was a
Wow.
big decision for the family. We
Yes.
made it together. We were aware of the risks that are related with moving with such a young family. My wife giving up her career.
Wow.
And so that would have to be a discussion had as well, and something that we would have to cater for and plan for, and something that I knew I would have to offset to my wife at some point. And it worked out well. And it happened. So long story short, few months later, we moved to China and we had a wonderful time there, a wonderful 2.5 years almost, right? But at that point in time, we made again a decision that it is time to go back to Europe. We didn't really specify a country back then, so we wanted to go back to Europe to raise our child there and well continue our development professionally as well as a family because we had plans to grow our family as well.
Yes.
So I then started applying to jobs remotely as I was in China, applying for jobs in Europe. Naturally, with being a European citizen, it was, I guess, easier for me. So a couple interviews later, a couple months later, I finally scored a job. And it happened to be in Scotland. So going to Scotland was never a plan when we set off that journey. Our
Wow.
goal was roughly Europe. And back then, insider joke here, Scotland was still part of Europe.
Okay.
Right? So,
That must be a
so
long time ago.
yeah, that was 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Much on the day, honestly. So yeah, it happened. Scotland chose us, I want to say, Edinburgh specifically, and that's how we found our way there.
Wow, that is an incredible story. Like moving from Poland, you went to your for academics in Germany. went back to Poland and opportunity called from your organization. You went to Asia with your family. And I must say that it shows that you have a quite supportive wife and, and you're both adventurous, having conversations with you. I know that adventure is one of the things that you embody. And of course, like an eagle, you just flew with your family all the way to Asia, China precisely. And now in Scotland, it kind of tells me that you followed where the opportunity was or is. And so where there is an opportunity, you went for it, which is kind of like the eagle, because from that elevated perspective, you're able to see across the horizon where the opportunities are, and you just went for it. And together with your family, that's an incredible thing. That is beautiful, I would say.
Thank you. That's a great analogy. Thanks.
Amazing, amazing. So now that you've walked across Europe, Asia, how has leading in different cultural environment shaped your leadership style?
Great question. Well, it definitely improved it. It definitely helped it. It definitely, what's the best word here? Enriched it. I think through the information you acquire from when you are in different places and talking to people of different cultures, at least in the way I talk to them, which is asking a lot about why they are the way they are. Not directly like that, obviously, but investigating why they are the way they are. So trying to understand the background of their culture. And that certainly enriches you as a person and grows your empathy, perhaps compassion as well, and sensitivity to cultural differences. And therefore, it helps you, well, I wanted to say manage, but maybe manage is not the right word. Use them for the team's advantage, and for the individual's advantage as well, because sometimes you need to play to someone's strengths. If you understand which strengths come from someone's culture, you can make sure that that person realizes their fullest potential, and that will benefit you as a manager and your team as a whole. So that certainly has helped. But on the other, so that's the knowledge about the people. But then there is the actual experience of walking and living amongst these different people and embedding into that culture outside of work as well, observing the rituals, tasting new foods. That's a great topic, by the way. Experiencing the different weather, which it often is, and how people cope with that. So, for example, in China, I experienced hurricanes for the
Wow.
first time in my life. So storms like I've never seen before, and that was interesting.
Was that scary?
It wasn't. I don't know why it wasn't, but that's kind of my weird thing, probably because I always loved storms.
The
Thunder.
Eagles love storm,
Always,
by the way.
there's nothing better than just watching a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
Anyway, so just that also enriches you as a person. It opens your mind, broadens your perspective, raises, I guess, your resilience as well, and I think makes you better later with problem situations and and helps you being more creative about approaching people, regardless of the culture they're from, and situations. So certainly an experience that maybe you could get from just living and working in one country, but certainly you would require more time to do that. So certainly I would say the international experience or mobility accelerates your growth as a people leader. But yeah, in all fairness, I mean, there are surely aspects there that you will not be able to get from just staying put, right? So I guess if you or anyone is looking at, perfecting themselves as a leader and people manager, international experience is priceless. It's a priceless experience.
Wow. Wow. And I totally agree with you. While you were just telling us this story, how you had the opportunity to start from the country in Poland and you moved to China. You mentioned something which I would term cultural intelligence, like you were investigating to have, more understanding about the culture. And understanding the culture makes you, know how to integrate with the people. And the second thing that I picked there is adaptability, because he talked about observing the cultures, observing the rituals, eating their food, meeting them where they are precisely, because you can't just isolate yourself. Like, how do you work with the people that you do not adapt with or adapt to their way of living and things like that? And I think that helps like you mentioned, when you're now working together as a team to leverage on people's strength and also work collaboratively the more. So which is quite interesting, and is a priceless skill, international skill, to lead teams very well. And I'm really thankful that you shared this story with us. And talking about meeting people where they are, I would like to ask, how do you stay grounded and maintain a sense of identity when you're always adapting to new environments?
So it's difficult, I guess, for me to stay grounded because somehow I was born with quite a good adaptability skill. So I adapt by default, and therefore I lose myself quite a lot of times, so I struggle staying grounded. And perhaps we'll draw a line here for a time before, I guess, my children were, I'm gonna say, aware of national identity, and afterwards. Because before that, before my children were aware of a national identity, it was not important to me to have one. It started really when I was a child. I grew up pretty much between two countries, Poland and Germany, because my family is split between those two countries. And I remember being lost. I remember not belonging one place or another. And I think the way I managed to cope with that or accept that is, I think I convinced myself that, well, it doesn't really matter. My nationality doesn't determine who I am. And if someone has to know what nationality I am, I'll tell them: one planet, one people. I don't care. But that kind of helped me to kind of cope with all of that and enjoy and embrace the world, as because I was just treating all people like my people. But then something happened not so long ago. I mean, my children reached an age where nationality starts becoming a factor from them, and they ask about it, and they see them struggling to identify as Polish or Scottish in this case. So that's where, I guess, grounding and nurturing characteristic of one or the other national identity became important. So what we do, it's not just me, it's we as a family, me and my wife for sure. What we do is we started observing and traditions from Poland and implementing some of the Polish rituals, especially around main festive periods, Christmas, your Easter. We would try, and funnily enough, in both of these holidays, there's at least two distinct days with two different things. So we try and hybridize. We try and implement rituals, traditions, and meals from Poland, and we will try and implement rituals, traditions, and meals from the UK or Scotland. And we mix them both, but we make it clear, like, this is a Polish dish, and this is a Polish thing we're gonna do now, or a Polish song we're gonna sing if it's Christmas and it's a Christmas carol, and then we're gonna do something that's more Scottish. And yeah, so we pay more attention to those festivities, to those rituals and traditions, and we teach our children about them. And I think that's how we do that. And I think
Wow.
it's nice because I guess it's good family time. It's good quality time with the family, and that's a great benefit of that as well.
Amazing. Very, very interesting story. And it shows the importance of having to still find your root and communicate that to, your children, because at some point your origin or your nationality comes up and you still need to say, yes, we are adapting, but this is where we truly are from. And these are the cultures. In terms of the food, songs, like you have mentioned, the festivals and all of that. And I am learning something from what you have just mentioned now, that you need as international expatriates or as global talent, that you still need to communicate your roots, your own identity and cultures and all of that to your children so they understand where they are from. However, understand that one planet, one race. How did you put that? One planet, one people. Fantastic. So yeah, because when you look at it, the world is one, right? The earth is one, and the people is just human race. Okay, it doesn't really matter that where you're from. If there is an emergency and there's need for a blood transfusion, they don't ask if it's a Nigerian blood. They just know that It's a human blood, and of course, it falls under the spectrum of the O negative, positive, and the rest. And then you can transfuse the blood rather, which shows that one race, one people, one planet. So I like that you have said, and I think it's something that we all, as the globe, as the world, people in this world, need to hold there. That one people, one planet. So while still retaining some of your cultural identities. Thank you very much for that perspective. As we move along on this podcast today, I'd like to ask what was one of the biggest personal or professional challenges you faced when adapting to a new country or culture?
Okay, all right. I think moving to the UK was perhaps the most challenging experience on my road on this journey so far, and that's due to two reasons that I'm going to discuss here. So one, yeah, the cultural shock. So the cultural shock of moving to the UK was much greater than the cultural shock I experienced when moving to Germany from Poland, or even to China from Poland, which I was surprised by, and I guess the listeners of this podcast might be surprised by as well. But yeah, indeed, it was in fact the UK that surprised me with how different it is from who I am or what I thought it would be. I can maybe elaborate on that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But the other challenge was when I was making that move, and that's from a professional level, I actually had to sacrifice a little bit of my career. At that moment in time, yeah, I had to kind of step down a little bit on the career ladder as I was transitioning to that country. From a position of a manager, in that case it was an IT manager. I moved into a, well, senior but an individual contributor, as you might call them. So that hurt my pride a little bit, and I thought that set me back in my career a little bit. But I guess, and I had to then put on some extra time and to recover from that. In the end, it went well, so I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't initially happy about that, but it made me who I am right now. It made me more resilient. It made me work harder. So in the end, I can say a lot of good things came from that challenge.
Wow, that is quite, I mean, kind of you to share that story with us because there are lots of people that are listening to this right now that are probably in that space and they are probably in a position to make a decision either to step down or to still go ahead with it, and they are dealing with all of this. So you sharing that with us is shows that one has to be adaptable and resilient again when you find yourself in this situation. You did mention that some other things in terms of challenge and all of that. Can you elaborate, and how did you deal with that situation? Because knowing about it, it's not a walk in the park, I imagine. So how do you deal with that reality? How do you sleep at night knowing that I'm stepping down in a couple of, step down just so that I'm making the sacrifice for my family, for a better life, to also integrate in this new environment. How do you deal with that transition though?
Okay, so to cope with that challenge and to deal with that, I think what I do and what works for me is I make plans. I make a plan for where I want to be and when I want to be there, so I can catch up perhaps the loss. And I make that plan and I honestly write it down, right, in some steps, put some dates against that. So I play a little bit of a project manager of my own career. And once I write that down, and obviously with some tangible actions related to that, do this, do that, I put that plan into action. And obviously that's not something that happens, over the course of a day and night, but it takes that helps. But the simple thing that helps me, not sure if it helps anyone else, is writing, having a plan, writing it down. That kind of takes a huge burden. It takes it out of my head, takes half the worries out of my head, or even most of it. Because then I at least, okay, now I know what I need to do. All I need to do is just do it now. That's easier than worrying. So I think that's really my main recipe, right?
Okay. Yeah, having a plan is something that is very important. And I think one of the things that your plan does for you is to also strengthen your why. It helps to bring to the forefront why you were doing this. because your plan shows you where you're going to. In other words, okay, I'm doing this now, but this is where I'm going to, which is now the why. And you can now weather the storm like the eagle again, knowing that I'm going to soar and eventually get a bigger perspective and fly even much more. And anyone listening to this now, understand that it's important to have a plan, have your why, and let your why be stronger than your how. It will keep you through the journey. And I think it's something that is beautiful that every professional needs to understand about transitioning in the global workspace.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
good point. I mean, let me just add something to what I said because
Okay.
there was one thing that you said that kind of has triggered a thought in my mind, and which I guess is very obvious. I mean, maybe it's so obvious that's why I didn't mention that. But obviously, what one thing that helped me cope with the short-term sacrifices was yes, that I'm sacrificing, I guess, my pride, a little bit of a well, one line on my resume. I mean, yeah, you could kind of simplify that to kind of make it look less scary. But then I'm gaining things as well. I'm gaining realizing another dream. I'm moving to that country that I wanted to move to. So that is a win. Now I moved to that country for specific reasons because I thought, it will have, some tangible benefits and they are different for everyone else, but suddenly you are one step closer to getting there, or maybe you're already there just by moving to that country. So you also focus on the positives, I guess, in a nutshell, because you're not sacrificing for nothing. You're sacrificing something but you get something in return, and you focus on that. You are happy about that. You are grateful for that,
Yes.
and you enjoy that,
Yes.
and that helps as well.
I totally agree with that. I'm reminded of a book called, I think it's called The Gap and the Gain by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and I've forgotten the other author. There are two of them who wrote this book. And the principle is quite simple that whatever adventure or endeavor, whether you're running a business or even your career, when people are tracking their progress, it's easier to look at the gap as opposed to looking at the gain. You may have set a target for yourself, or moving from point A to F, but you got to D and you look at, oh my gosh, I have a gap between D and F, as opposed to looking at the gain that you have acquired, moving from A to D, which is a beautiful thing. And when you do that, it shifts the perspective and it takes off the pressure. Not to say you're living in denial, but it rather puts you at a state where you have you show gratitude and you show thankfulness that you are making progress, and everybody needs to practice this, and which is one of the things you just mentioned to us. Now you focus on the win for yourself, your family. This is what I really wanted, okay, and I am getting there. I'm achieving this already, and it's a beautiful thing that we all need to practice.
Absolutely. Amen.
Amazing, amazing. Wow, we are learning a lot from this session today. And as we proceed further, I'd like to ask again one very interesting question, and I do believe that it's very interesting. And here is why: how do you approach, building trust with other, trust and connection with global teams with different backgrounds and different expectation? Because yes, you had mentioned that there was a sacrifice, but you're a manager now where you work. You have teams that you look after. You are in that position that that you desired. And right now you're working with multiple people, not just from the UK alone, but from different cultures. So again, to recap the question, how do you build trust and connection, with different people from different background?
Okay, yeah, great question. Well, there's a lot of things you can do, but I guess, and it's a process, and it's well documented also how you can do that. But I'm just gonna put all that to aside and give you my own authentic, I guess, answer. And I think I always build trust with no matter who by being authentic, but also being transparent about myself. And those are the two words that or things and processes that I always use, no matter with who I'm dealing with. but with people from diverse backgrounds. There is some extra work I do. And it's quite simple. I think it's not rocket science here, or apologies, you were expecting some major revelation here, but I just want to hear their story. So I give them the opportunity to for them to tell me their story, how they get to where they are, why they did that, and even if it's a life story and we're at the workplace, I don't mind. I want to know that because it's important context to understanding who that person is, why they're here, what motivates and drives them. And as a manager, I need to understand that. It will allow me to manage them ultimately better. And but that's that can be a big question. But I also use simple questions. Tell me about your country. Tell me about your rituals, your traditions. Tell me about your food. Tell me about your sports.
Wow.
Yeah, and all that stuff, and I even make that a team event. I think I didn't do it with my current employer, but my previous employer, I asked everyone in my team who was and everyone was from a different country, to kind of to prepare a short 10-minute presentation for our team meeting that we had. So over the course of a couple of weeks, each member presented about their country. The things that they liked about their country. So to keep it positive, just in case there were some weird things there.
Yeah,
You never
sure.
know. But yeah, so tell me your story. Apart from be authentic, be transparent yourself, because that
Yes.
builds trust. But then if you want to deepen that connection,
Hmm.
yeah, tell me your story, I'll tell you mine, and tell me more about where you come from and what makes out your culture. I want to know.
Wow. It's very, I think you said that it's quite simple, it's not rocket science, but the truth is that what you've said is built on one of the classics. I'm reminded of Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. When I started my career in consulting academy, one of the books that we were asked to read was that, because as a consultant, you work with people a lot, you need to build connections and all of that. And one of the things that I would never forget, book taught me, was to show authentic, genuine interest in people, which is what you've talked about. You ask questions about them, let them tell you more about themselves, what they're excited about, what they're passionate about, and their journey and things like that. And people tend to gravitate towards those that are kind to them, who show interest into what they where they're from, what they do, and things like that. Of course, with a bunch of other management principles and all of that. But I think the fundamental one, which you were telling us here, is being authentic, being transparent, with people that you work with. And that way you can collaborate better, because you feel like, I know this person, where they're from, where the values that they embody, and that this person will has my back while we're working together, at least on the same objective. We are heading in one direction. So that is very, very nice. I totally agree with what you have said.
Can I just say something about that? It's okay. I didn't read that book, but it's when you said that, I realized something, that the genuine interest in other people.
Yes.
I think it's my opinion. I think that that's genuinely a thing that is a Polish thing. I see this a lot in Polish people, that we really like to know about other people's lives, whether they, especially when they're foreign, and to the point where we come off as a bit weird,
Wow.
very nosy, but it's kind of, yeah, it's how we are, it's what we do, it's how we are, it comes kind of natural to us, to the point where people don't do it to us, we almost feel like, okay, they don't like us, it's that they're rude by not asking, so I think that perhaps I'm lucky that, yeah, I kind of was born with that.
Wow. I know it's you are absolutely lucky, because honestly, I had to read a book to learn it. However, I'm from Nigeria. We are also very, very communal in nature. We show interest in other people's thing. Oh, you just give birth. What's the name of the baby? I want to come for the baby naming ceremony. As opposed to how it is in the Western culture here. Just work, work, work. Leave your personal lives out of it. Of course, there is that intelligence to also understand. So that you don't overshare, and it comes with adaptability, like you had talked about. Adapt to the way things are done here. However, when you find people that embody the same fundamental values like you've mentioned now, you show that genuine interest that it's shown, and it's going to be reciprocal in that way. It's also, you don't come across as being nosy.
Yeah, this is especially difficult here in the UK. I think people
Yes,
are very private here. And
yes.
and by the way, going back to your previous question about the cultural challenges, I think that was one of the biggest ones here. Like me coming from
Mm.
Poland, Europe to the UK, I wasn't expecting that to be quite that difficult. Hey, but it is what it is. I had to adapt.
So I'm going to ask a very interesting question, and at the back of what you've said, I'm going to ask, I think, two questions in one. So understanding that people in the Western culture here are very it's very private. I mean, it's just what it is. It's the way of life. It's not that it's bad in itself. It's just the way of life. People like their privacy. So how do someone who is less traditional or non-Western background, how does someone like that navigate this? How do they navigate this, whether as individuals trying to find their own community or try to build their own pack, like pack of wolves, um, or try to also integrate in the workplace? How does one navigate that professionally and also in their own life, because it also has some connection to creating that well-being, balancing your
Yeah.
mental well-being as well.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, before I answer, I'll just tell you something hopefully that you'll find positive. I don't think the whole people being private applies to the whole of Europe. I think it's particularly strong in the UK, but it gets, in my opinion, much better and easier in mainland Europe. I think you'll find it's quite okay there,
Okay.
or at least not as quite as difficult here as it is here in the UK.
Okay.
Now, how you navigate that? Now, I wish I had an answer for you, or that it wasn't easy. And but truth be told, I still struggle with it.
Wow.
I think it's more of the way I try and cope with that is I don't like that it is like that. I don't agree with it being like that,
Okay.
but I accept it.
All right.
Right? So the way I cope with it, I work around that. I try and find people who are not like that. Most of the time, those are people from other countries.
Hmm.
And I end up befriending them. That's how it works for me. And yes, as you said, it's important for your mental well being because if you were constantly exposed to people where you really can't be yourself, after all, because being yourself, meaning asking those questions about other people's personal lives and journeys and stories and really wanting to understand them and also wanting to share them. But you ask the question, you don't get an answer, and also you don't get a question back, and you feel like I just
No
done
go
this.
area.
Clearly, this isn't working, okay. And it frustrates you, it saddens you, it builds up a stress and an imbalance. So, yeah, but I just tell myself, okay, well, let's not force it. I want to change them. Maybe it needs time. If it's a relationship that you really want to work
Yeah.
on and you really want it to work, I guess be patient, take your time.
Yeah.
There is probably a saying that I can't remember right now, but patience might get you there. Slow steps will perhaps change and open up that person, and you will end up having that good relationship.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
one thing, as I said, I'll go back to the quick workaround. So it's a workaround. You just find the people who aren't. You might find them in people from other countries.
as well, and like you mentioned earlier, is one planet, one people. So we're all still, one human race. One. It's a human race. So one race, and we connect with those who are more receptive, and eventually others who are probably they need more time to understand. Because just like there is the culture that likes to connect with people. There are others who are probably not used to it, and of course, they require more time to build that trust and connection, to also understand and share in your experience and things like that. So I think it's just the way things are. It's not that something's wrong with this. No, it's just what it is. However, with time, things would, shape up. But it's also important to build connections with people that are, around, because we are, especially when you're coming from a background that is heavily built on that communal relationship interactions and things like that, professionally casual conversations and all of that, nothing too serious or things like that, but it also helps takes off the pressure and stress, and one needs to find theirs. I know that professionally there are different communities that one can find and join. It could be a professional network, it could be a network maybe where your faith-based network or something, and you just find that network that helps you create that balance as well. So I totally agree.
Yeah, cool, cool.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you very much for that. So we've really had some interesting conversation today, and you've been generous to share with us your journey, your stories, and all of that. I do understand that. I think we had the conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional experience, or which sector are you professionally? What do you do? And let's get to know about that. And what is it like, especially in this AI generation? What is it about your profession? How does it help the world, the organization where you work, and other organizations as well?
Okay, yeah. So I've been professionally active for 18 years now. Yeah, so almost 20, let's call it, right? And for most of that time, so for 15 years of that time, this was all my career was all around digital technologies. I don't want to call it IT because it's a very vague term. So digital technologies, the use of technology, and but for the past 8 or 10 years I focused more on information and cybersecurity, so I guess I consider myself an information and cybersecurity professional at the moment.
Amazing, amazing. Wow, that's good to know. So, for someone who is wanting to build a career in that information and cybersecurity, where do they start from?
Well, you start with education, ideally, but that's not always necessary, by the way, because I have met, and I am one as well, and I have met a number of excellent information and cybersecurity professionals who had a completely different background. And I'm talking English literature, psychology, to give you some very random ones, right? But obviously it helps with education. If you don't have that education, you obviously start with self-education or courses and certificates to kind of compensate, or evidence that you have acquired the right knowledge.
I,
But starting in cybersecurity, who I wish I could tell you. I wish I could tell you. Well,
of
yeah.
course, there are quite a number of, like you mentioned, self-education, which I totally agree with. There are quite a number of this platform like EDX, Coursera, that have these courses that you can start with, and there are also simulations that you can do to give you the foundational knowledge, and there organization that offer apprenticeship, or you can do some internship and all of that, whether volunteering, and eventually you find your big break in an organization that say you have the foundational knowledge that you can start into fully as a cybersecurity information and cybersecurity expert. So I totally agree with you, because like for somebody who did English literature or psychology, they didn't have to go back to the university to start afresh, but they build upon what they had already done, and they use things like this. I imagine that was the case, to then getting certifications and all of that, right?
Yeah, and I just remembered one thing that I think, because the reason I was hesitant about the answer is because I really hadn't thought about this, or I can't really remember how I started, or for me it started very differently. For me it was a very windy and rocky road to get there. It was absolutely no straight line. So, but I remember speaking to a fellow professional who actually told me, made an interesting suggestion. He said, if you are that novice, the beginner, whether you just graduated or whether you just want to transition into cyber and information security, he said, yeah, it's good if you have some nice certs, badges on your resume, but show me that you can do something, or show me that you've done something on your own time. So perhaps have a little bit of a GitHub repository where you can show that you've done some research. that maybe you've investigated a case, a cyber attack that happened somewhere to someone else, and that you kind of analyzed it, interpreted it, you drew your own conclusions,
Yeah.
something like that. Or maybe you're more technical, you've built your own piece of malware, a virus of your own. I mean, it's not exactly what we want, but at least it shows that you know how that works.
Applying the knowledge, yeah.
Or maybe you've you found that a piece of software has a vulnerability, or you just built your own security lab. So, it always helps if you can demonstrate that you as an individual have done something proactively beyond just the studying, beyond just the course. You've done something with your own hands, or hands-on in your own
Yes.
time. So that obviously helps. You mentioned AI. I think nowadays you have to
Yes.
have a basic understanding of using AI for that
Yes.
industry, or at least being able to explain how it could be used. So those use cases for AI specific to that kind of job that you're applying for, I think that's probably a question that will come up on all job interviews in the next few months.
And that is true because, of course, AI seemed to be the icing on the cake for every, professional. Every professional would encounter AI, how they use AI in data, how to use AI as a project manager, business analyst, cybersecurity expert, even as an architect. Everything has AI integrated into it. So I totally agree with what you said. And anybody listening to this is one of a framework you can use, and you can start to build that experience and build a repository for yourself, GitHub, and things like that. So wow, you have been very, very, abundantly generous by sharing this wealth of knowledge, just sitting and listening to all the things that you have experienced, the struggles, the challenges, and also the fun part of it, having traveled as an eagle, maybe an eagle to your name. How many countries have you traveled to beyond work?
Okay. Well, quite a few, because I really like it,
Yeah.
and at the same time I don't like going back too much. So I always try and visit a new country every time I go somewhere. How many? I really love countries around the equator, those tropical and countries which have rainforests and tropical warm seas. So I traveled in a couple of countries in Southeast Asia. Let me see: Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Philippines, obviously China. So that's five down there. Then Latin America would be Costa Rica, Mexico, Belize, Guatemala. That's four. Well, I've been to the US, Egypt, it's 11, and Morocco. So those are the two African countries I guess I visited. And then most of Europe as well. So
Wow.
easily more than 20.
More than 20 countries. That is interesting. That you're living up to the value of, of the eagle, really. Just I would just say spreading your wings and flying, even through the storm of the hurricane rather of China and across to other countries. That is very beautiful. You were to give an advice, because we're wrapping up right now. If you were to give an advice to your 25-year-old self, just one piece of advice, before you started this your global journey, what would that be?
Okay, I think it would be patient, because good things take time. It's like a meal, if you want something fast, like a fast food, it probably won't be good for you in the long term. Now, sometimes, yeah, I understand that some people might be in a different situation where they need to act fast and they have really no choice. So yeah, that's fine then. But be aware of that. But yeah, to those who have time and can take the time to plan, prepare better, do that. Do that. And the outcome will be of better quality. So yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing with us your experience, your knowledge, both professionally, working with different cultures, as a leader, as a professional, even as a family person. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Mr. Dominic is somebody that you want to follow. His link to his LinkedIn profile will be on the show notes of this podcast. So please follow him, and you can benefit from his wealth of experience as he shares, on his professional network, social media channels rather. And again, thank you so much. It was really, really interesting just hearing from your knowledge.
No, thank you, thank you, Edward. It was great to be here. I hope that I'm grateful that you had me here. It was some great questions. You really got me sweating here for a few of them and think hard about them.
Wow.
But that's really good. That shows quality. I wish that my answers will give knowledge, comfort, and maybe hope to some of your listeners, because I think that's how I would define the value of what I'm sharing here. So
Yes.
I hope you will get that.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is so much value in what you have shared with us. So thank you once again. And for listeners, you can click on the next episode that is so rich here. Thank you for listening to this particular episode where we discuss so much on how to navigate global leadership insight from a cross cultural career. Thank you so much and do have a nice day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.